Right, next up, you've got a treat of a session with some children dialing in from the Western Isles and a number of young people here with us today. So the next session is titled Bright Lights, Youth Scottish Climate Initiatives. And to moderate this session, I'd like to welcome Katie Reid from the Children's Parliament and her speakers.
Good afternoon, and thank you all so much for coming to our Bright Lights panel. What an amazing space to be in this afternoon. We're really excited to have this time together this afternoon. A little bit of nerves, but mainly excitement, which is always a good thing. My name is Katie Reid, and I work for the Children's Parliament here in Scotland. And I'm thrilled to be joined by some absolutely amazing children and young people. The children will be appearing up there very soon. From across Scotland who are working on some extraordinary initiatives about climate action here in Scotland. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. So I'm going to hand over to the Young People's Forest team. And Finlay, would you begin by telling us a little bit about you and what the Young People's Forest is?
My name is Finlay Taylor. I am 22 years old. I am part of the Young People's Forest, which consists of 23 young people from around Scotland, aged roughly from 11 to 25. And we are a co-design panel, which means we are sitting in those boardrooms and getting those says at the high levels of businesses, partners, and governments that we've heard today so much that everyone is trying to get young people involved in. And we are going from zero to all in. We're purchasing the land, we're building the forest up from ecosystem to trees, and we're going to manage it, and it's going to be a young people's legacy for young people in Scotland. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Finlay. And Nellie and Josh, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourselves and what inspired or motivated you to get involved with the Young People's Forest?
Yeah, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Nellie, and the reason I wanted to get involved with the Young People's Forest is because, like so many of us, I was starting to feel like individual climate action wasn't enough, that just by paying taxes that we're contributing to funding fossil fuels, the UK government has spent since 2016 £3.2 billion of public money on North Sea oil and gas. So I just felt like I had to get more involved in this project. Felt really special because it gives us the opportunity to directly work with the land and kind of redefine how we want to relate to land that doesn't include exploitation and extraction in that kind of way.
Hello, I'm Josh and I'm from Murray, and what inspired me to get involved in the panel is that this panel is an amazing opportunity for young people's voices to be heard, because the voices of young people aren't always listened to, or they don't get the chance to say what they want to about the climate. But on our panel, the young people are the ones who are making the decisions.
Thanks so much, Josh. And we're thrilled also to be joined by 3 members of Children's Parliament who are dialing in from South Uist in the Western Isles. So we can all look up and say hello. I'm going to hand over to Seumas, Margaret and Atholl, who are each 11 years old, and to introduce yourselves and to just say a little bit about what it means to be in Children's Parliament.
I'm Seumas. I'm 11 years old and I live in Williamfitch in Benbecula. Margaret.
Hi, I'm Margaret. I'm 12 years old. I live in Griminish on the Isles of Benbecula.
Hi, I'm Atholl. I'm also 11 years old. I live in the Isle of Grimsea, North Uist.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. It's just so wonderful to have you here, and you're especially amazing because you're right in up there with the trees, which is so cool. It's kind of like you're part of the forest, which is amazing. I was just wondering, Margaret, for some people, you might not know what the Children's Parliament is here in Scotland. Would you like to explain what the Children's Parliament is, and maybe what it means to be a member of the Children's Parliament? And now I will say, and I think we might be encountering this, there has been a lot of storms on the Western Isles this weekend, and we're experiencing a few technical issues, but hopefully Margaret's been able to hear us.
So the Children's Parliament is just a group of young people. All of us are children, and we just want to make a difference and have our voices heard. And that's who we are, and that's why we're here.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Margaret. And I'm now going to invite Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Seaman. You might have noticed I am not a child or a young person by Scottish standards, but I'm really clinging on to the European age bracket for youth. My role is actually I work with the YMCA. I'm at a local community centre in North Lanarkshire, at Bells Hill and Moss End. And what I do there is I oversee our youth programmes and support young people to have their voice in the local community, including the new development of a community garden. And as well as my work with YMCA, I'm also a freelance facilitator, and I support co-design and democratic processes, including Scotland's Climate Assembly and supporting people like this lovely lot to engage with those co-design processes across the country.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And some of you here today might notice that we're also joined by this very special member of the panel. So I'm actually going to hand over to Seumas, who's going to explain who this is and why he's here today.
Brochan is our mascot at the Children's Parliament. And he's a hedgehog, and we call him Brochan because that is in Gaelic, the language that we speak right now, for porridge, which we thought was quite cute. And Margaret has wrote.
Brockham's actually the most fortunate of all of us. Brockham's the most fortunate of all of us from the West from Children's Parliament, because he's actually got to travel around Scotland meeting different members of Children's Parliament. He's got to experience the US weather, which isn't exactly the best. He's got to go all over Scotland, so he's our special mascot.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Margaret and Seumas. And we'll come back to hear a little bit more about what the children have been involved in here in Scotland in just a moment. But as many of you will be aware, climate crisis is a really important issue for many children and young people across Scotland, and one that they care deeply about and want to be part of the solutions in their communities at a national level, right up to an international level. And so it's going to be a really nice time to hear from what you've been doing and to hopefully inspire others who may be interested in supporting children and young people within your communities to take climate action too. So to get started, I am going to bring us back, because we do have good Wi-Fi signal at the moment. So I'm going to bring us back up to Margaret, Seumas and Atholl and just begin to ask you a little bit about your experiences. So within the Children's Parliament, you are the youngest and some of the first children to have been involved in a climate citizens assembly that's been happening here in Scotland over the last year. And so back in October 2020, children came together from Children's Parliament to be involved in this deliberative democratic process. And the adult assembly members and the children at Children's Parliament worked together for about 6 months to come up, deliberate the climate issues and then come up with recommendations and the children's calls to action that were laid in the Scottish Parliament in June. So excited to have the chance to hear from Margaret, Seumas and Atholl, who played a key role in that. So I guess my first question for you today is kind of over to Seumas, because one of the key parts of your investigation for the Climate Assembly was around looking at all of the different evidence, but also looking at the impact of the climate crisis within your own communities. And so I wondered if you could begin by telling us a little bit about the impact of the climate crisis where you grew up and what that means for children and adults living there. That's always the unfortunate thing about working remotely. When it freezes, you don't know what image is going to be frozen on, and it's maybe not the best, but
climate change is impacted by climate change is impacting us by eroding our land, and that's bad for adults and children here, because for children, that means when we grow up, there might not be an island here anymore. So basically, our island could be just and now you're 150 years. We don't see about this. Just
I'm going to suggest that we come back to Seumas in just a wee moment when the signal's slightly stronger. Obviously, with the stormy weather, we are seeing the direct impact on what communities are facing in the Western Isles with difficult connectivity issues there. So I don't want to speak over or cut over Seumas there, but I do think we'll hopefully get a better signal at some point. So I'm going to bring us to our Young People's Forest team. We'd love to hear about what you've been up to. It's a really innovative project. So I guess, Nellie, would you like to tell us a bit about what your role is within the Young People's Forest?
Yeah, thank you. So just to give you some context, in Scotland, around just under 2/3 of the rural land is privately owned and only 3% is community owned. So although we have the right to roam, which means we can walk and cycle and camp, if we want to relate to the land in a different way, so work on the land, for example, growing food or kind of affecting the land in any kind of way, then you need to buy it, which isn't accessible for most people, especially not young people. So we're really excited to be creating this forest, and basically our role is, and I think the climate crisis really shows that we need to think of different ways to relate to land. So what our role is, we're kind of thinking of the way we as young people want to relate to the land. We want to work with the land, and we want to reach as many young people and see how they want to relate to the land, so that in this space that we're creating, that it's safe and it's what the young people want. And then also when the time comes, working really closely with the community that's on the site to make sure their needs and wants are met as well. So yeah, we're really prototyping a forest, and it's really exciting, yeah.
That's fascinating, and it's just such a really interesting example of how connected, children and young people are to all the different areas of the climate crisis as well. And obviously, we are so rich in the opportunities for forests here in Scotland, so it's brilliant to see this happening. And Josh, Nellie alluded to the fact that you're working with industry professionals and adults from lots of different backgrounds to make this happen. So thinking about, what is it like having your views and your opinions being heard in that process, but also what are maybe some of the things that you've learned along the way?
It's been a really good opportunity to be working with professionals and experts in land management and forestry, because they have been very encouraging of our ideas, and they've been supporting us to bring whatever we want to into the forest. And we've also learned a lot about land management issues and environmental issues when trying to create a forest, because even though you're planting trees, there are some barriers that stop you from making it sustainable and friendly to the environment. But I also think that all of the young people on our panel are really creative and have amazing ideas. So it has been really good to have experts who can help us to put all of these ideas and make them viable parts of our forest.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Josh. And it's interesting because I'm just seeing our Western Isles crew dialing back in. It's an issue that children, younger children, are also really, passionate about. And tree planting was one of the key calls to action that the Children's Parliament came up with and presented to the government as part of the Climate Assembly. They're really keen to have a national tree planting day where every child and adult could get involved and be part of the reforestation here in Scotland. So to see you guys doing it in action is so cool, and will definitely set the pathway for others to follow suit, which is brilliant. So I think I'm going to see if we are able to hear from Margaret, Seumas, and Atholl. Could you give us a sign if you're able to hear us here in Glasgow? Great. Atholl, we've just been talking a little bit about what it's like working with adults to make some of these climate solutions come to life. And I wondered, recently you were meeting with decision makers in your community. I think it was your local member of Scottish Parliament and also some of the local councillors out in the Western Isles. I was just wondering, could you tell us a little bit about what you were talking about and how that went, and any kind of, key things that you felt you'd like them to take forward?
We were talking about how we can protect our island from the effects of climate change, such as how to protect our biodiversity, especially sea life, which some families on the island like mine depend upon from rising sea temperatures, and our coastline to the extent of erosion Seumas mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were speaking to your local elected representatives, do you think, what were their views? What were they going to do next after the conversation you had?
I thought they were going to think about them, but I don't know if we ever got real confirmation that I cannot remember.
That's absolutely okay. There's plenty more time for conversation and that to be an ongoing dialogue between you for sure. But thanks so much, Atholl. And Margaret, we've been talking a little bit about the Young People's Forest. I don't know if you were able to follow it, but these guys here are creating a forest here in Scotland. And this connects to one of your key calls to action, doesn't it, about having a National Tree Planting Day. But would you like to say anything about the other calls to action you and the other children came up with?
Well, I actually have a favourite calls to action, and it's actually that we had an Eat for the Planet Week. When to go vegan or vegetarian for that week, just have the better things. If you have the we meat and just have the good quality meat, the farmers don't make that good quality meat. And that's why we put it as a call to action. We need.
Thanks so much, Margaret. And I think just the end of that might have been that we really need to be thinking more locally around produce and the kind of what's coming in our areas in terms of growing our own food, having a more locally source-based diet when we're thinking about that. I know that's something that the children have been really passionate about throughout their investigation for the Climate Assembly. So thank you all so much. We'll be coming back to you in just in a wee moment. I'm going to bring round to Rachel. You have been working with children and young people at lots of different levels, from kind of local community work right up to the international space, and you facilitate children and young people's participation and engagement. So I wondered, kind of building on some of the conversations that we've had today, what are some of your reflections on the key things that really make this work? What are the ingredients that we need to make children and young people's participation a success?
So I think something that's really evident just from the young people we have here, but also across all of COP and in all of our local communities, is that young people are incredibly passionate, and that if they are given a platform, they will utilize it to work towards positive change. So really the call for action is for adults and decision makers to create that platform. And it's not just about creating that platform and ticking a box to say, oh, look, we're helping. It's about really wanting to make meaningful changes within our own cultures, not just within our communities, but even within our workplaces. It's about having to give up some of that control and that power that we're always desperately fighting for. And it's also about trusting the process. I think sometimes at the start of these co-design processes, when you're bringing people together, especially children and young people, there's lots of incredibly big ideas, big blue sky thinking, and that sometimes terrifies us because we're always thinking about parameters and budgets. But actually, we just need to realize that this blue sky thinking is where the really creative ideas come from, and you can start getting into the nitty-gritty of the parameters further down the line. But sometimes us adults get too bogged down with that, and as a result, we become really stagnant. So yeah, it's about wanting meaningful change and actually creating platforms for it.
Brilliant. And I mean, I guess this works really nicely with having young people here who are going through that co-design process right now, and also for the children at Children's Parliament who've been working together with adult assembly members in the Climate Assembly. So Finlay, perhaps you'd like to share, from your experience in the here and now as part of a co-design group. What do you think, really makes participation meaningful for young people in this context?
Well, this is my second panel with Young Scot doing the co-design process. The first one was Reroute, which was Scotland's youth biodiversity, which had its first aspiration end in 2018. And both times, the real reward and challenge as well, especially with a 3-year kind of long-term volunteering project, is noticing not only the effect that you're having in, let's say, planting a forest for Young People's Forest, but also the people you're engaging and the minds and thoughts that you're having and changing of other people around you. So we've got a consultation out right now. We've got a lot of things happening right now through a co-design process, and through that you can check our website with www.young.scot/YPF. There we go, thumbs up from the crowd, did something right. And yeah, a lot of it is just realizing that those blue sky ideas, as was pointed out, isn't a bad thing. Yes, we can have those blue sky ideas. Somebody's gone and said, let's have young people plant a forest. We're working through that now. We're going to be looking at land, stuff like that. And it's noticing that, yes, we can have those blue sky effects, but also the nitty-gritty needs to happen as well eventually. But we'll stick with blue sky ideas.
And yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant to hear your reflections on that. And I am curious, like, what do you see as some of the challenges or the things that maybe we need to be doing better here in Scotland?
Possibly making it more well-known and the co-design process more implemented in other sectors. Because as I say, this is my second panel with Young Scot, and both panels have been kind of firsts in their field. So Reroute was first youth biodiversity panel in Scotland. This is Scotland's first youth forest panel. Young Scot are great at it, but as far as I'm aware, there's more than Young Scot and YouthLink in Scotland. And our partners are great, but let's have them create more youth panels as well. Let's get this co-design process throughout Scotland, because the challenge is 2 groups in 6 years, 7 years, give or take. That's great, but then that's almost only 40 young people, really. Let's have more.
Nellie and Joshua, do you want to add anything there?
Sorry. So the question is...
Thinking about the co-design process, how have you found, what do you think makes it really meaningful for young people to be involved in a co-design process?
Yeah, so I think for me, the reason why it's so meaningful is because often there's a lot of exclusion. So since we're at the COP26, kind of the voices that really should be heard are not. So within the blue zone, it's all leaders who are more motivated by profit than people in land, basically, and kind of the people that have travelled really far, the Indigenous people and the young people who really care about the future. And it's also young people who are going to have to deal with the effects of the decisions being made now. And I think the leaders really know what they're doing, and they're actively, you know, making these decisions. So I think the value of co-design is just really that voices hopefully are heard that are not, and that's not what's happening at COP. So it's really valuable, and I think, yeah, maybe it should be happening on more decisions that are going to affect our lives as well, yeah.
Absolutely, and just for those who maybe don't know, here in Scotland there is a really important thing happening for children and young people. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is soon to be made part of Scots law. At least we're on the journey towards that point, which means that children's rights to have a say and young people's rights to have a say and be taken seriously in decision making will, as Finlay and Nellie have sort of shared there, become the norm. And it's really exciting to see the kind of the cultural shift needed as well in order for us to get there. I'm going to come back to Margaret, Seumas and Atholl, because you've been working with adult assembly members, but also with, and I never quite know where to look because I can sort of see them here and here too. That's why I'm sort of a bit all over the place. But you've been working with adult assembly members and adult decision makers over the last year to really drive the kind of calls to action that you would like to see change here in Scotland in terms of climate action. So Margaret, I wondered, like, you know, if we're thinking about working together with adults, like, do you think you felt listened to and taken seriously by the adults that you've been speaking to over the last year?
I have, because before I just thought, yeah, my parents listen, yeah, my teachers listen, who else does? My friends do, and my classmates do, but not really anybody that can make a large difference like the council or the government, or just adults that know that. But then when I realised that people did actually care, they wanted to hear what I had to feel. It was sort of like this mad desire. They had this mad desire to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Margaret. I'm sorry.
So I do feel taken seriously, and I think it's made listen to me.
Thanks so much, Margaret. That's really positive to hear, and you know, we are seeing the impact of your contribution to the Climate Assembly has been like internationally recognised, which is amazing. And we'll hopefully be able to come back and ask you a few questions a bit later about what your kind of key messages are for other people that might be interested in running a Climate Assembly and involving younger generations within that. I'm going to come over to Rachel, because you were also a facilitator in the Climate Assembly, and you, through the kind of experience you've had as a facilitator and as a creator of spaces for children and young people's participation, I was just wondering, what kind of do you think the international space can learn from us here in Scotland?
So I think internationally people need to, first of all, look really closely at what's actually going on. There's so many incredible youth initiatives already happening. I mean, within the YMCA alone, there's a global warming project happening in Hawaii, tackling food waste. There's projects in Peru using plastic to create eco-bricks for infrastructure. Young people in San Francisco are kind of mapping the impact of climate change on vulnerable communities and looking at how we can build resilience and minimize risk. There's projects in Cork working towards climate justice. So I think recognize what's already happening. There's already appetite from young people in your local areas. I think what Scotland benefits from is buy-in at all levels. So we're really, really fortunate that we have a government that are really pushing for co-design. We had the Year of Young People in 2018. There's a lot of legacy projects from that. Young people are being brought together with all levels of government. Most local authorities have youth panels, youth forums, youth councils. So again, there's lots of opportunities for young people to be heard. And so really that needs to start trickling down into kind of public and private sector here. And hopefully the international community can look to some of our leaders and follow their lead.
Brilliant. And what do you think in terms of what we can be doing more of? How can we support more children and young people? And this is a question for anyone. Like, how can we support more children and young people to get involved in these kinds of things? You know, what can we be doing more in here in Scotland? Any ideas?
Getting young people themselves to feel confident enough to go to wherever and to be able to say that this is their opinion. So walk into a board meeting and go, I believe, let's say, mental health is an issue and it needs to be taken seriously. And for those board members to go, okay, how are we going to do it? Rather than for young people to go to those board members, we need to take this seriously, and for them just to say, like, almost tick a box, go yes, and then not pursue it, sort of thing. And I think the more that young people around the world, but young people in Scotland especially, see that young people are on panels like the Youth Forestry panel and other panels, and are actually saying that this is important and getting that done, like you're seeing the physical change, the more and more that young people and organisations as well will embrace the co-design and embrace the more young people. So I think everyone needs to have a more blue sky approach.
I'm liking this. I feel like our panel's gone from bright lights to the blue sky thinking panel, and I like it. We can think about that for next time. For the younger children here today, I was just wondering, what do you think we need to be doing to support younger children to participate in climate action and different projects about climate change? And Seumas, Margaret, Atholl, over to you with who would like to answer that one. Everyone's looking a bit better.
I think that we should encourage more people, and I think we should do something like go around, ask about, see who actually has different opinions, and take what they've said on board, and to get younger children involved, I think we should actually go up to them and say, oh, what would you like to happen? And then take their views on and say, well, this was another child I'm friends with, and they went, and I met this one, and they gave me this information. So I think we should take what they say on board, and it might encourage them to be a little bit more confident and speak out a bit more.
Brilliant. Thanks, Margaret. Seumas and Atholl, would you like to add anything? What do you think helps younger children feel like they're being listened to?
Just evidence, like if you say something to the like a counsellor or something, you have and you don't hear anything from them anymore, and you haven't seen anything happen, like something you haven't. Yeah, well, you should at least get some, like, you should at least be told that your counsellor asked, like, other people in the government or something like that you should at least know that, you know that you've heard.
Absolutely, Seumas. It's such an important point about like feedback and making sure that you know the outcome of the participation. So thanks so much, Seumas. We're going to shortly bring the audience in, and you're welcome to share questions for the children and young people and for Rachel here today. Sorry, Rachel, you are still a young person. That's not me. Just. For the children and young people here today. So do take a minute to think about the questions you might like to ask. And we know there's also questions incoming from the virtual space as well, which is very exciting. In the meantime, just for our panelists, just a quick check-in. Obviously, questions are going to be incoming. We'll take two at a time, so I can maybe bounce them around to whoever would like to answer. We'll see if hopefully our connection withstands, so that we can share some with the children as well. But there's no pressure. If you want to pass it back to me, that's absolutely fine. So do we have any questions so far from the audience about what we've been discussing here today?
Hi, I've just got a question for the young people. What ideas do you have that can help us move from individual projects on climate to kind of more long-term dialogue between you guys and decision makers?
Great. Is there another question, or should we just kickstart with this one? Okay, I think we'll go straight in there. Would you guys like to take that one on first?
Yeah, I think something that will make it more long-term is that if young people are involved from the start when making decisions, because I think if young people are involved, it will give them a sense of ownership over what they have done. And I think it will, once you start involving young people, people higher up will realize that it's a good idea, and that will encourage more people to do it. And the young people have ownership, and they will want to keep looking after what they have created.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that a lot of young people already are involved in climate, and so for example, Fridays for Future, there's so many young climate leaders, and it's actually young people who, as well as with Indigenous people and lots of other groups, are really spurring this movement forward. But the people who are making decisions are 74% male, old, majority white, and it's just getting that diversity in and getting those voices heard as well on kind of the bigger platforms for the bigger decisions. So it's not, yeah, that's what I would say.
Thanks, Nelly. Thanks so much. We'll take two other questions from the audience. I think there's one just over here, and there's another one just a little bit further back. So we'll take both.
Hiya. You talk about sort of diversity of voice and making sure, we get that and how it's important, but how would you suggest that people go about doing that?
in the blue zone. No, so I guess I can speak for what we're doing is we're doing a lot of focus groups. So unfortunately, even though Young Scot put the call out, unfortunately, we, in terms of whiteness, we are a majority white group. So what we're doing is really trying to focus on looking at other ethnic groups, doing focus groups, seeing what the cultural needs, etc. are. In terms of with the blue zone, that's quite a big question. I guess all I can say personally is I just wish that those voices were more heard, voices that care more about people and land than profit, and who aren't directly funded and financially benefit from fossil fuel companies and industries. So that leaders would really lead rather than being selfish.
Josh, sorry, did you just want to add something?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think it's important for the organisers who are making these groups to know what it is that is putting a barrier between people from other minority groups and backgrounds that stops them from being a part of the panel, because it could be a lack of information. They don't know that this exists, but if we try to find out what it is that stops them from joining, I think that we can make it more diverse.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Josh. Thanks for sharing. There was another question we didn't quite get to you in time before we dived in there, so would you like to share your question with us?
Thanks. I was just wondering, I love the blue sky approach, and I think that's a great angle to come at it at. But being realistic as well, I imagine you face some quite big challenges on the journeys that you've all gone on, and I've certainly heard lots of feedback from young leaders at COP that are facing challenges right now: access, voice, platform, agency. Could you perhaps give an example of a big barrier that you've perhaps come across in your journey, and how you're working through or have worked through that, so other people might be inspired by how you've approached it?
Brilliant. I actually wonder if this is maybe a question for the children. I'm just wondering in terms of, what things might have been a bit difficult along the way, if we're thinking about the journey you've been on with the Climate Assembly, and how did you overcome those challenges? Margaret?
Well, we've all faced the challenge. I think
We're facing one right now.
Actually thinking sort of negatively that no. So how I overcame it was talking more, which is one of the things I'm good at.
Thanks so much, Margaret.
And making my voice heard a lot more, and I managed to couple strength in talking and used it to overcome the barrier.
Great, thanks so much, Margaret. I think there's a lot that can be learned from that for other younger children who are perhaps feeling nervous or anxious about having their say and speaking out about the issues that they care about. So thank you, Margaret. Rachel or Josh, Nellie, Finlay, would you like to answer that question as well? What kind of barriers have you overcome?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here, and this is not one I've overcome, and this is a major global issue that we need to really just recognize, is that climate is such a holistic issue, and the reason a lot of people aren't engaging and aren't being given a voice is because if you're dealing with an immediate concern, such as, I don't know if I'm going to have a roof over my head tonight, or when am I next going to be able to afford to buy a hot meal, or major concerns, you're not thinking about, well, I'm going to avoid fast fashion and I'm going to take part in climate marches, and so really we need to recognize that we still need to work towards all of those sustainable development goals. This is a much bigger picture, and all of these things do tie in together. You can't have climate justice without having a just and fair society. So, and this is where that kind of blue sky thinking comes in, because yes, we could get bogged down in parameters and is it realistic to wipe out poverty? but if we don't try, we'll never make progress. So I think we do need those big bright lights, blue skies ideas, and we just need to work towards them as much as we can to create an inclusive space and work towards meaningful, positive change.
And now we are coming to the end of our conversation together, but I thought that to wrap this up and to kind of end on a kind of key message from each of you, I wondered if you could share either one top tip for children and young people or one key message for adults about how they can too be part of climate action. What would that be? What would your advice or top tip for them be?
I can start. So my top tip would just be to find local groups and things to get involved in, because there's definitely a lot of people that care, and there's groups that care that are doing a lot of things. So a lot of the things Young Scot are doing, there's Stop Cambo, there's a lot of from the Green New Deal, etc. So if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed and anxious and feeling like you want to do something, then finding people who have the same kind of thoughts and feelings and kind of doing it together, that would be mine.
My top tip would be that how important it is for people to work together and to involve communities and working in groups. Because, for example, seeing how many people were at the march yesterday and how many people are in the hub today, we are a community who want to combat the climate crisis, and when we're all working together, we can get so much accomplished. So I definitely think that the only way that we can get through all of the injustices is if we are one community who is all working together for the same goal.
My tip for young people is to have hope, to be honest. One word, quite simple. But people are listening to us. It doesn't feel like it always, but the fact that there's now a Scottish Young Person's Forest created for young people, by young people, is proof that cogs are turning, wheels are turning. So it's not all doom, gloom and all that. So have hope. And my tip for all the adults, politicians, world leaders, whoever's watching this, is let those young people have hope. Use co-design. Let's co-design COP next year. Co-design does work. Let's do it. We all want young people to have a voice. It's who is going to get affected by climate change most. So let us give them that voice on that international scale. So challenging everyone right now to have a co-design COP next year.
Thanks so much. Rachel, what would yours be?
I don't have any tips for young people. They're doing great. They're smashing it already. Just keep doing what you're doing. But my tip for decision makers and adults, and I'm completely stealing this. So Youngo, who are the Global Youth Initiative working alongside UNFCCC, released their Global Youth Statement on Friday, and they're calling for radical systemic change and meaningful youth engagement. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to change, we need to relinquish that power, we need to hand over the reins, and we need to trust the process, that this co-design process does work. So yeah, that's it for me.
And last but certainly not least, we're going to hand over to Margaret, Seumas and Atholl. What are your top tips for children who may want to have their voices heard in the kind of decisions being made about the climate crisis? Or what is your message for the adults that are listening here today?
My message for the adults is always try and buy second hand whenever you can. There's still going to be some emissions involved with delivery, but it's a lot less, and less water is getting used overall than buying new, especially with clothing.
Thank you, Atholl.
My top tip for children would be get to the local council, get to the local MP, just try and get something done in the local community to help tackle this climate crisis.
I think mine for the children is go wild, get creative, do something that will really make people think they have a good thing, they have a reason. And I think my message to adults is a phrase that we made up a good few months ago. It's up to you, me, and all of us.
Wow. Well, thank you for bringing us to a close on such a powerful message, Margaret. We really appreciate that, and we really appreciate everyone here today that's taken the time to come and speak to those here in Glasgow, but also those that are dialing in from all over the world to watch. So huge thank you to all of you for taking the time to share your views and reflections, and thank you to the New York Times for having us here this afternoon. Thank you also to the teams at the Young People's Forest Children's Parliament who've been supporting the children and young people on this journey too. But yeah, most of all, big thank you to the children and young people and Rachel here today. So round of applause.